All right, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Mardee DeSantis, and I was asked to come today to talk to you about my journey with having my son diagnosed through newborn screening. Before I really get into the heart of my presentation, I just want to tell everybody that this collection of people is absolutely amazing, and the discussions yesterday were very inspiring and just very touching to see what all of you are doing for newborn screening and just trying to, do the best that you can do for these babies who are born with rare diseases that might otherwise go undetected for years. I think that as a parent, we all have a story for our children, and we just really hope and pray that that story will make a difference somewhere along the way. Okay, so I just want to share with you our story about learning about our son's diagnosis, both good and some of the negatives that came from finding out so early. Okay, so I am from Columbus, Ohio, and I am a very proud mother of 3 children. I've got my son Tony, who's 14, my son James, who is 10 years old, and my daughter Jeannie. And James and Jeannie are twins. Beautiful, great kids, pretty amazing. But for the purpose of talking about my experience today, I am going to be focusing on James. Okay, so I want to take you back to the year 2007. Pregnant with twins, everything's going great. Pregnancy and delivery were really drama-free. So James and Jeannie arrived the morning of October 29th, 2007. They were healthy and they were perfect. And we just enjoyed the fact that, our family had grown by 2, and my son, who was then 3 years old, was so excited to be a big brother. He just kind of gushed over these little babies. So while we were in the hospital, we had family and friends, doctors, nurses, in and out of the room. That happens when you deliver. And so we didn't really think too much of this visit by these 2 doctors. So I blurred this today because at this point, after delivery, it was about 24 hours after delivery. Via C-section, I was recovering from a big surgery. I was in a lot of pain, and I was exhausted at this point because it was very difficult to get any rest. So these 2 doctors walk in, and they told us about a doctor at our local hospital who was doing a research study on newborn screening. And they just kind of asked if we would be interested in hearing more about it, that they would simply use a blood smear card that was already done to do an additional screening for a disease we had never heard of at all. And for us as parents, they just told us that it was going to be non-invasive because they were just taking the blood smear card that was already done, and that because it was a research study that there would be no cost involved for us. So, we were thinking research, good. Non-invasive, no cost, even better. So why not? So we signed the consent forms, never gave it another thought whatsoever. So weeks and months went by, and we adjusted to our new family of 5. And like any parent, it was just so much fun to look at these little babies as they're growing up and just imagine thinking about the life that they'll have ahead of them. The birthday parties and, holidays, playing sports. My husband and I were athletes in high school, so we were really looking forward to, softball and basketball and, that kind of things with our kids, and of course football. We're a big football family. High school, college, family, career, we're looking forward to all of these things and just imagining all the possibilities, and that they were limitless at this point. Okay, so 3 months go by, and on February 6th, 2008, our entire world changed. I received a phone call that morning around 10 a.m. from our doctor's office. I was told the doctor had set up an appointment for us for 4 o'clock that afternoon, and that my husband and I needed to be there. We weren't asked, can you be there? We were told we needed to be there. So that's number one, not a good thing. We were told, bring your kids if you need to. If you can't find coverage for them on such short notice, bring them. We will take care of them. Strike number two. And that all the nurse could tell me about the request for this meeting was that it had to do with one of the newborn tests that were done at the hospital. So you hear all of this, and what does the girl do? She calls her dad. My dad happens to be an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, and he worked at the time in a very small clinic, and his clinic was right next door to the pediatric clinic. So I called him, he talked to his colleagues, and what they told him is that nothing on the newborn screening panel would take 3 months to get the results back unless it was something that was different or specific or special. So again, going back to that conversation with the two doctors, we had completely forgotten that we had signed these papers. Okay, so we arrived at the doctor's office at the appointed time and were led into a conference room. Okay, I didn't even know my doctor's office had a conference room. So we were taken back there with the kids, and nurses came in and took our kids, all three of our kids, out of the room. Our doctor came in, sat down, and put a box of tissues on the table. Not a good thing. So we knew that something was terribly wrong. So on February 6th, at approximately 4:15 p.m., our world was forever changed because that was the first time that we had heard the words Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. We had never, I can't say we never heard it before, because we did hear it that one time when the doctors came in to ask for our consent. Never thought about it again. So our pediatrician did her very best to explain what she could about DMD without completely overwhelming us. And that was fine. We had the relationship with our pediatrician, and she did her best to try and touch on DMD and what it was about, but you know, you see the words muscular dystrophy, and your mind just goes so many places. Well, at this meeting, our local neuromuscular clinic sent over one of their fellows to talk with us, answer any questions, which in theory would have been a good thing. But actually, this doctor made this appointment so much worse. So here we are as parents. We have these perfect babies, and they just told us that something is direly wrong with one of them. We had just heard the word Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy minutes earlier for the first time. We really didn't know what to think. We didn't know any questions to ask. We were really at the mercy of the doctors at that point to give us any kind of information. So this doctor that came from the neuromuscular clinic starts just jumping in, just dove right in, matter of fact, just giving us the facts and the details. You know, we're parents who just heard this for the first time, not what we needed. So she started using words like mutation. What in the world, you know? Okay, so apparently she tries to explain that the dystrophin gene has got 79 exons, and when there is something wrong with any of those 79 exons, you get a mutation. And apparently our son had a very large mutation. He's actually missing exons 5 through 42 in the dystrophin gene. She used these words, progressive disease. Okay, so progressive is usually good things. You know, progressive, you're moving forward. You know, positive movement, well, not in disease world. Found out very quickly that progressive disease means it will continue to get worse. And then she talked about muscle weakening. How can that be possible with a baby who looks perfect? That there's weakening in their muscles. It just, again, not making a whole lot of sense. So she started to talk a little bit about treatments and what was going on. So we found out that really the only treatment, and it's not even a treatment so much, just steroids are given to Duchenne boys. And so corticosteroids are given, and because studies have shown that kids who take corticosteroids when they have Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy ambulate about a year and a half longer than those who don't. Ambulate. There's another one. I should have put that up there. Yeah. So then she starts talking about drug trials. And we're thinking, okay, we've got this. What do we do? Drug trials. She starts talking to us. And there were a few that were in the pipeline at that point. There were just maybe 2 or 3 that were actually doing any kind of human trials. But because of the mutation that my son had, nothing would apply to him. She would say, oh, they're working on this, but that won't apply. And they've got this that's coming up and might become in trial in the next couple of months, but it won't help his kind of mutation. So now we hear these words and nothing that applies to us. So she then starts to kind of tell us what we have to look forward to with Duchenne. And we hear the word wheelchair, because Duchenne boys are usually off of their feet on average, between the ages 10 and 12. The muscle weakening leads to that they just can't support their body weight anymore. So full-time wheelchair by 12. She talks about ventilation and how some boys, when they're in their later teens, if they make it to their later teens, and when they get to their later teens, will need some sort of ventilation because, again, we've got a muscle weakening, progressive muscle weakening disease. Your heart and your lungs are muscles. So the heart and the lungs start to give out. So the boys need help with their breathing. And then we got to hear these wonderful words, life expectancy. We've got a 3-month-old baby. He's perfect, he's beautiful. And we get to hear about what we have to expect with his life. And at that point, we heard late teens, maybe early 20s. Okay. All of this is bad, but we're in the United States. Medicine, amazing technology, this country that's so advanced and so, just has all this technology at our fingertips, and then we get to hear the fact that there is no cure for Duchenne. Nothing in the pipelines, nothing that's going to apply to our son. We can't do any kind of treatment until he's about 5 years old because doctors don't start boys on steroids until they're close to their 5th birthday. Okay. So needless to say, we were shocked. We were stunned. Our perfect baby boy had a terrible disease, and there was nothing that could be done at this point. So I'm going to stop my story right here for a moment because this is where I really struggle with our experience, just our experience with newborn screening. I've been asked what my opinion is on newborn screening in general. And while yesterday was filled with these stories, these wonderful positive stories about newborn screening and identifying kids, and we all know that it's so beneficial. I also feel that we need to acknowledge that there are negative side effects for families. So sitting in that conference room, hearing about my son's diagnosis and the awful life that he had ahead of him, and having no path forward was absolutely devastating. Not only was there no cure, but there was nothing promising that could help my son. Not until he was 5. So that's one of the reasons why I titled my presentation Our Empty Diagnosis, because at that point we just had nothing. So once our meeting ended, the nurses brought my kids back to us. I picked James up, but something was different. He was different, I was different, and all of a sudden, I didn't know this little boy. Whose child was this? I was holding him, but I had no idea who he was. There was such a disconnect. It was as if all of a sudden I was holding a stranger's child. Up until a half hour before, I knew this child. I was fully invested. I adored this child, but now I didn't know him. Before this, I knew his cries, knew his favorite bouncy chair, knew his favorite position to be held. And that just wasn't the case anymore. I struggled with these feelings for weeks and months after our diagnosis. I would go into his room at night and look at him and be at a loss. And it wasn't the case with my daughter. My daughter and I, no problem, nothing interfered with that. But something happened with hearing that diagnosis, and it was immediate. So the feeling eventually went away, but it took time. And time is absolutely precious with Duchenne. Okay, so now I want to acknowledge some of the great benefits that we got from newborn screening, and they far outweigh the couple of negatives. So this is some good stuff here. So one of the things that our pediatrician, one of the statements that our pediatrician made in our meeting was, the bad news is he has Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, but the good news is that he has Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy in Columbus, Ohio. And those words have proven over and over and over to be one of the strongest statements that we got, in this entire Duchenne journey. Because you see, Columbus, Ohio is the home of Nationwide Children's Hospital and Doctors Jerry Mendel and Kevin Flanagan. So by being diagnosed so early, we were actually able to get our son under the care of two amazing doctors from the age of 3 months, because a week after we were diagnosed, we were in the neuromuscular clinic at Nationwide Children's Hospital with Jerry Mendel. Then a few years later, Kevin Flanagan joined the staff at Nationwide. And so my son has been able to be under the care of two leading researchers and pioneers in the neuromuscular field. And this last picture over here, so my son is 7 years old in this picture, and I've got both Dr. Mendel and Dr. Flanagan with eyes on my son, just my son, one child in the hallway. I've got these two amazing doctors with eyes on my kid at the same time. Nationwide Children's Hospital. I couldn't get that anywhere else. So they have been amazing in our life. And my son, we see Dr. Flanagan most of the time now. My son loves him. He actually reminds me about his appointments, his MDA clinic appointments, because he loves Dr. Flanagan. He fully trusts him. He knows that Dr. Flanagan genuinely cares for him. And he has been with us every step of the way. He shows up at, if we've got DEXA scans or MRIs, or my son got follistatin injections a couple of years ago, and Dr. Flanagan will show up just so that James knows that he's there and supporting him. Okay. So getting another great benefit was that by getting such an early diagnosis, we had time. We had time to learn about the disease. We had time to have these wonderful conversations with Drs. Mendel and Flanagan about our son's course of treatment. We had time to find out what was going on in the world of Duchenne and get comfortable with it. We did not have to make the time-sensitive decisions that parents have to make when they get their child's diagnosis after the age of 4 or 5, and their sons are already showing progression. We had time, and so that, for me, I'm not a research person. It gave me this great comfort zone to be able to make the decisions that we needed to make and feel good about them. And the fact that we had, Dr. Mendel and Dr. Flanagan having these conversations with us over the course of 4 years before we started our son on a steroid, and before we got involved in any kind of a drug trial, was such a benefit, for me and the type of person that I am. We were able to, so finding out at 3 months, let me go back. My 14-year-old son has got a whole different kind of genetic disease, and so we have been through, we had already been through state and federal health benefits, insurance, and things like that. So that was a great precursor for James. So I knew immediately in fact, on our way home from the doctor's office, talking to my husband saying, okay, tomorrow I need to call so-and-so and get him on the waiver list. So a day after we got our diagnosis, I was on the phone with our caseworker saying, okay, how do I get my son on the wait list? These wait lists are years long, thousands of kids on these wait lists to get state and federal health insurance and health benefits. I was able to get him on as a 3-month-old, and so by the time that we needed, once he got older, so by the time we needed steroids, by the time he needed his first pair of night splints, his first manual wheelchair at the age of 4, as he got older, a stair lift that we just had installed this past September, and now this nice big, incredibly way overpriced expensive power wheelchair. We had access to everything that he needed when he needed it because we were able to get him on these lists at such an early age. So he's safe at home, he can access everything at home, and you know that's everything, that he feels safe at home. Okay, his physical development. Yesterday, Lynn Wong shared a quote from a parent expressing guilt over not understanding her child's fatigue because she didn't know he had Duchenne. For us, knowing about Duchenne allowed us to plan for appropriate developmental expectations. We knew that he was going to develop slower than his twin sister. And plus, his twin sister hit every milestone early. She's an overachiever, still is. So we knew, and we expected him to sit up 2 months after his sister, to start crawling 3 months after she was crawling, and to start walking 8 months after she had started walking. We knew that he was going to have trouble running, jumping, and climbing, and doing all those things that kids do at home and on the playground in the backyard. We knew he was going to have trouble with all of that. But we knew to expect it, so we didn't panic. You know, we didn't run to the doctor and, oh, he's slower than his sister, what do we do? We didn't have to worry about all of that because we knew that this was coming. We never expected him to ride a bike or play organized sports with his peers. So basically we knew not to push his activity level, and we were very good about listening to him. So when he told us he was tired, we knew he was tired and he needed to take a break, and that was okay. He felt safe telling us that, and we honored his requests. Because you see, when Duchenne boys overexert themselves, there's a price to pay in the loss of muscle function. So we did what we could to protect and preserve those precious muscles that he had, and also while still allowing him to be a little boy. You know, he directed himself. And we were able to work with our school system. Before he even walked through the doors for preschool, we had already met with him. We were able to talk with his teachers. We were able to talk with the staff at the schools to let them know his special circumstances. A physical therapist went through the elementary school with us before school started, and we looked at drinking fountains. We looked at where the bathrooms were. We looked at the configuration of the classroom. We talked about using a chair for carpet time instead of making him sit on the floor, where he'd have to constantly sit and stand up, which was going to be a burden on his muscles. He had people who helped him go to the restroom. He had, for recess, our school has got a very large playground, so for recess, we had a table that was set up outside with games, puzzles, and Lego blocks, so that if he was too tired to run around and run the scope of the playground, he had alternatives that he could go to for those days that he was tired. And being able to talk to the staff as a whole, they all knew if they saw him, or if he was in someone else's classroom, that they had the same knowledge as his classroom teacher and wouldn't make him do excess movements or the up and down and that kind of thing. So it was really great to be able to work with the schools before he even got there, and we were able to set up procedures that are still in place today, and he's still, I check with him often. How do you feel at school? Do you feel like you're safe? Do you feel like you're well taken care of? And he always says yes. And part of it is because we knew ahead of time and we were able to educate from the moment he stepped into the school. So getting James's diagnosis early obviously was difficult for my husband and I, but it's allowed our entire family to be very comfortable with the word Duchenne. We use it, we acknowledge it. James knows he has it. He can tell you I have Duchenne, and what that means is that my muscles aren't as strong as everyone else. And he knows this. He can feel that he's losing strength. So he knew it was time to get a bigger power chair to help him along. And actually getting that power chair was one of the best things we've ever done. We use the word, we're comfortable with the word, my daughter knows the word, and so it's become part of our family. It's not this thing that my husband and I whisper about, it's something that we all acknowledge, so that we are able to, do things as a family to support James, but it's not just about supporting James, it's really about who our family is. So these pictures were taken just about a month and a half ago. There's an organization started by a very good friend of mine whose son also has Duchenne. She's in the same school district I do. Her son's a year ahead of James, and so it's just called the Duchenne Dash. Lots of friends, lots of family, lots of community come out. This is our family picture from that day, and this is my daughter running alongside James. James was so excited for the Duchenne Dash this year because he was going to roll, and he did. He rolled a 3K, and he felt so good about it. So my daughter's growing up in this culture of my brother has this disease. She's an amazing sister, helps whenever he needs it, supports him in any way she can, and this picture just speaks volumes about who she is. It also, raising James, knowing that he has Duchenne, has really given him a great sense of control over what's going on with his body. He feels the weakness, and he knows why. He knows the reasons, and he knows the purpose for his medicines. We tell him, okay, here's your steroid. What is this going to do? And he says, it's going to keep my muscles strong. He takes lisinopril. He knows that's going to help his heart. He has these medicines that he takes, and he knows why. He knows why we're going in for DEXA scans, is to check how strong his bones are. He knows why we're going in for cardiac MRIs, is to check and see how strong his heart is. So he is, we want him to know who he is and what he is, and it just gives him that sense of power and control when his body is so out of control. People ask if I would do newborn screening again, knowing what I know now. I think the answer is, I know, yes, I would. But I want there to be a big asterisk next to my answer of yes. So while preparing for this presentation, I was talking to several of my Duchenne mom friends and was sharing with them, probably for the first time, the experience I had with James after we got the diagnosis. And I asked them if they had a similar experience with feeling a disconnect with their sons when they heard about Duchenne. And all of them said no. The difference is that all of their children, all their boys, were older. They were past the age of 4 when my friends all got their diagnosis. And so I think the age of the child is going to make a big difference for the parents. And I think that when you're doing newborn screening for a disease that you can't offer anything, you can't tell them here's your treatment, or this is what we know, this is a treatment we can pursue, this is something we can think about. I think that when you're going to give a parent deliver that kind of news at such an early age, I think you need to take that into consideration and be very cautious. I don't know what age would have been better to find out about Duchenne, but I know that 3 months wasn't it. 3 months wasn't it. So today, living with Duchenne. James is very happy and, overall very healthy. As healthy as he can be with Duchenne. His heart is still good, and we'll take that. But we also know that with Duchenne, things can turn very quickly. So I know the ugliness that's in our future for him, but we choose to live in the moment. Okay, so this is a quote from a very dear Duchenne mom friend of mine. And she once said to me, is my story going to be about a little boy who's dying or a little boy who's living? And my friend's name is Marisa Penrod, and she runs the Team Joseph out of Detroit, Michigan. And we choose for James, and James chooses for himself to be very much living. My parents are great supporters of my family, and my dad will basically say, okay, James, what do you want to do next? And he loves Disney cruises, so he can go to the beach. He wanted to go to the Grand Canyon, so guess what? We turned up at the Grand Canyon. For his Make-A-Wish trip, we did Disney, so there's a picture of him in a lightsaber battle with Darth Vader, and that was huge for him. Ziplining, playing lacrosse, kayaking with Dad. This picture up here, he's in a helicopter getting ready to take a tour of a glacier in Alaska. He loves football, absolutely loves football, and we are Pittsburgh Steelers fans. So when you ask him what he wants to be when he grows up, he wants to be a kicker in the NFL. It used to be quarterback, but as he watched football and he saw how much that quarterback got tackled, he changed his mind. So up here in the corner, he's meeting his the kicker of the Steelers, and that was huge for him. And we actually had the opportunity to take a tour of the Steelers stadium and go down on the field. So he's down there in a picture on the bottom, kicking a ball with Sean Swisham, who was one of the former Steeler kickers. So he's got to do a lot, and he will continue to do that. So knowing about Duchenne so early has actually allowed us to raise a boy who is certainly living in the face of Duchenne. And I will leave you with this little clip of him. Okay, thank you.